How's it going, fellow crafters? Today I'm going to show you my take on making ooze miniatures. More specifically, today we'll be making a black pudding, but this technique can be used for all the different oozes. So let's get into it. Whenever I craft a monster miniature, the first thing I do is thoroughly read the stat block and the background information. A full health black pudding is a large size monster, so I'm going to cut a base that is roughly 2 inches by 2 inches. However, it does have the split reaction, so each large miniature is going to need 2 medium miniatures and 4 small miniatures. When I cut the bases to their dimensions, I go slightly over because I'm going to make the shapes irregular and lose some material in the process. So the large base is actually cut about 2 1/4 by 2 1/4 inch. The medium bases are cut 1 1/4 by 1 1/4, and that pattern breaks down with the small miniatures because it just gets too small and the hot glue is going to pour over. Once I have my 2 large and 4 mediums, I draw some irregular shapes befitting of an ooze and then cut them out with an X-Acto knife. These shapes will be below the gameplay dimensions, but because the hot glue is going to pour over, it's going to bring it back to that proper size. To help the hot glue flow off the sides, I bevel all the edges. Don't worry if there are some sharp ridges or the shapes look a bit geometric. This is all going to be covered by hot glue. And here I'm just counting out my bases. For 2 full health black puddings, I should have 2 large bases, 4 mediums, and 8 smalls. To cut back on the amount of hot glue I have to use, I add some height to the large miniatures by ripping off some pieces of XPS foam. Roughly speaking, the middle should be the highest point, and it should somewhat slope down on the sides. I keep this in mind when I'm positioning the pieces. If you have a high point on the edge, you can obviously just rip it off with your fingers, or you could decide to add a pseudopod to that part, which we'll get into later. This step is only necessary on the large miniatures. Now for the pièce de résistance of the project. Go to your grocery store and pick up these bread twist ties that you see in the produce section. Every time I buy a loaf of bread, I always make sure to save these. These are perfect for making the pseudopods. You can shape them with great precision, and they're also wide enough to catch a lot of glue. By bending them in a loop, you can double up on the width and make a larger pseudopod. Because you have so much control, you can make 2 or 3 pronged pseudopods. Really, the sky's the limit with these. Once I get the pseudopod to the appropriate length, I then attach the base with hot glue to the piece. You can then fine-tune the shape after it's attached. When fine-tuning the shape of the pseudopods, I find it's a good idea to get a miniature and place it next to the piece. That way you can shape the pseudopod into an attacking position that's appropriate to scale. This will help make the piece look like it's alive and moving. Just keep in mind, once you add the hot glue to the pseudopod, there's no going back, so take your time with this step. When it comes to the small black puddings, all you need is a short segment of the bread twist ties. Now to create the ooze with the hot glue. Throughout this project, while applying the hot glue, you're going to need some parchment paper. To give it that oozy look, we're going to do this in layers. First one, you want to cover all the XPS foam over the edges and cover all the pseudopods. Make sure that you cover up all the bread twist tie. You don't want any exposed. At this point, the pseudopods are going to be kind of flat, but with the next layer, we're going to build them up and make them more rounded. If you need to speed up the process and move on to the next layer, you can put this in the freezer and cool it down really quickly. At this point, I had added that second layer to the base, but I still needed to build up the pseudopods. You can see how that layer makes it look like ooze cascading over itself. Once I was satisfied with all the texturing with the hot glue, I then applied it on the bottom and pressed it down on the parchment paper. This gives the miniature a nice level base, and it's less likely to slide around on the battle mat or the tiles. Once the hot glue is cooled, you can move on to painting. Now your first thought might be to black bomb these with spray paint. However, when applying the hot glue, sometimes you get wisps that stick to the outer edge. And to cover those up, I apply a very liberal amount of Mod Podge. This will smooth it out and make it look more like ooze. Make sure that you get in all the crevices around the pseudopods from every direction. It's easy to miss a spot. There's a bit of a purple hue to the black puddings, so I highlighted with dioxazine purple, which is a very dark purple. Because this is so dark, the effect's really subtle, so I was quite liberal in my highlighting. I also went in and dry brushed as well. Once the highlights were dried, I did one final step. I went in with a satin varnish by Deco Art. This gives it a bit of a shine, making it look like it's wet. While the varnish is wet, these are going to look really purple, but once it dries, the purple goes back to being more subtle. And there you have it, my take on a classic craft ooze miniatures. This is a quick and easy build, super cheap, and a nice filler project between larger projects. And now for the old YouTube spiel. If you like what you saw here, please hit that like button, and if you haven't yet, consider subscribing. I got more videos on the way. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you on the next episode.